My scientific colleagues go to places like Greenland, the Arctic, they go to Antarctica, and they drill into the ice. And we pull out long cylinders of ice, long ice rods. And we find certain of these cylinders to have 680,000 layers. How could it be that just 4,000 years ago, all of this ice formed?
In my debate with Bill Nye, I only had a few seconds to respond to his claim about the so-called annual layers in ice. I referred to the Lost Squadron, which you can see in this diorama. During World War II, 8 planes, 2 B-17s and 6 B-38s, were on their way to Scotland via Iceland, but they had to turn back because of a storm. Now, they were running low on fuel, so the pilots had to make emergency landings on the ice in a remote area of Greenland. All of the pilots survived and rescued 6 days later. The planes were eventually discovered in the 1980s under 250 feet of snow and ice, and amazingly enough, an expedition figured out how to bore a giant hole in the ice and bring up one of the P-38s piece by piece. That plane, now known as Glacier Girl, has been repaired, and it was even flown from Kentucky to New Jersey in 2007. Now, while the details of this real-life adventure are fascinating, there's one crucial point that's often overlooked. Those planes were found under more than 250 feet of ice, less than 50 years after they landed. Yet Bill Nye and others want us to believe that every little ring they see in ice cores represents an annual layer. But these layers are formed every time the snow and ice thaw a bit and then refreeze, and they're often associated with different snowstorms, which of course can form many times in one year in Greenland. The 250-foot hole that was bored to reach the plane had far more than 50 of these so-called annual layers. But how could this be if the layers only form one per year? The truth is that these layers in the ice are not annual layers. So Bill Nye and others who push the idea of millions of years while talking about annual rings in ice cores are simply wrong. Furthermore, the 680,000 years that Bill Nye talks about don't even come from counting these so-called annual rings from an ice core in Antarctica, as Mr. Nye seemed to imply. The counting of these layers is actually done on the Greenland ice cores, and those cores show about 110,000 layers. It's true that the area where the planes were discovered receives much more snow today than the central region of Greenland where the ice cores were taken from. But the conditions during the ice age that followed the flood would have led to heavier and more frequent snowfalls throughout Greenland. The amazing story of the Lost Squadron shows us that these are not annual rings. Once again, we see that observable, testable, and repeatable science contradicts the secular belief in millions of years and confirms the truth recorded in Scripture.